Everybody's got a story. You just have to listen. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this is Good Listen. And we're wrapping up season 1 with Mary Helen Bowers. Now, so far we've had psychics, drummers, actors, writers, therapists, influencers, and it's been amazing to hear all their stories. And Mary Helen is no different. She was a little girl in North Carolina who dreamed of becoming a ballerina, and she did. She was so good, she trained Natalie Portman for her role in Black Swan. So, how did this little kid from North Carolina become one of the biggest ballerinas in the world? Let's find out. Good morning, Mary Helen. How are you?
Hey, Joe. Good morning. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm happier now that you're here because I want to talk about ballet. And since you've been doing this for a while, you're a good person to ask because I'm always fascinated by how people find that thing. So I had very limited skills as a kid. I tried everything from karate to guitar. I couldn't find a thing that I was good at. I think luckily I could talk to people, so I stumbled into a career on that. But like the idea of like these, and not the ballet's niche, but it's something that like you can't just walk down the street and find a ballet studio across the country. So how did you first know what ballet was? Like, who was it? Your parents? Was it something that you saw? Because that's where I want to start. Like, how did you even know ballet is a thing?
That's a good question. And I was just absolutely drawn to it. I don't come from an arts family. I don't come from a dance family. I didn't have stage parents or really like aggressive, helicopter tiger parents. Like dance and ballet, I somehow or another found it, and we can talk a little more about that. And I loved it, and I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. I knew it, and I pursued it, and I had to really negotiate with my parents because my mom is a now retired children's librarian. My dad is a certified public accountant. Like it wasn't like they were out to raise, a prima ballerina. I just happened to be really good at it and completely obsessed with it from the time I was pretty young.
Do you know when the epiphany was that this is my life? Like, not that you like love it, because I'm sure as a kid you're probably loving the dancing with friends and building this community. But like, was there a certain age where like, oh damn, this is a career. This could be a career.
Totally. As I got so the way I really got into it, I was around 8 when I started. I had taken a class when I was little, maybe 3 or 4, like a lot of girls do, a ballet tap class. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. I went once a week. We had a little recital. I remember being on stage and not knowing any of the steps and like looking in the wing and watching the teacher and just doing, who knows if I did anything. And you like, now as a parent, when I go to see recitals, like you see the kids like that on stage and I'm like, I remember that feeling, just being like, like struck in the lights. But when I went back that next year after I finished that class, so I was probably 4, my best friend wasn't taking it with me and the teacher changed, and I did it once or twice and I didn't like it and I cried and I was like, I don't want to do it. So when I had a friend in my neighborhood growing up, and I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, like really lovely, sort of idyllic suburban American childhood, right? Like riding our bicycles, going to the pool in the summer, riding the bus to school, just, good Americana. And one of my good friends from our neighborhood was doing ballet, and she was talking about it and kind of dancing around. And I saw her and I was like, that's what I want to do. I just knew that I wanted to dance, and I had to beg my parents to get into these lessons. And then as those lessons pursued, it started like 1 class a year. And I'm seeing now the same thing with my kids because we have 3 daughters and they're all doing ballet. So it's interesting now to have the perspective, now I'm like a dance mom. But I remember so well when I was doing it as a kid. So it's like 1 class a year, the next year, if you're going to do it, there's a progression. And I'm sure the same thing is true of sports. The next year you're going 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. So by the time I was in, 6th or 7th grade, I was there 6 or 7 days a week, every single day after school for most of the weekends, because you're doing rehearsals, you're doing classes, you're doing the Nutcracker, you're doing a spring show, you do a recital. It becomes, I think much like competitive sports, like a very consuming life. And, I think part of it is that you have to really love it to want to do that. But that was around the time, I'd say, when I was like 12 or 13, when I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I love this, and I want to go to New York, and I'm going to become a ballerina. As crazy as that sounded.
And you talked about your parents having like from a white collar world. During this transition, when you were going from one class a week, I'm sure your parents like, okay, cool, we could drive her to class once a week, and then it becomes 5 and 6. What was the support like at home? Were they like, yeah, let's go take you to class, whatever time of day it is, every day? Like, what was the support for your family then?
Both of my parents were working. My mom, so we, and most of my friends at ballet, frankly, most of those friends, not all of them, but most of them had, but like, both of their parents worked too. So they all had moms that worked, and basically we kind of formed a carpool system. So, my friend's nanny would take us to dance, and my mom brought us home, and that was just how we did it. So it wasn't as kind of crushing on one family or one parent, because they sort of got together and pooled their resources to do that. And I think that made it a lot easier. And I will tell you, driving our kids to dance now, I'm like, it'd be really nice to have somebody help on the other side. Like, our kids are still too young for that. But
Yeah.
but I can see that when they get a little older, and I also remember, like, sometimes I would ride as I got a little older with one of the teenagers who could drive. If there was a high school senior at the studio, she would, and we were going to a different class across town or something, she would take us to that. So we definitely kind of came together as like a group. It's a pretty small group of people at that time in a city like Charlotte that were pretty serious about dance and doing it, 6 or 7 days a week. So you make really good friends in that process.
That's really cool. And it's so funny how striking it is to you now, because probably as a child, you had no idea that there must have been this sort of like, and this is pre, like, yeah, Google Calendar, but like the
Yeah.
idea of like all these people coordinating all of this. And you as a kid, like, okay, cool. I got to class. My mom picked me up. It's all good. But now as a parent and you're like, holy crap, this is a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, I think that there's a lot more involvement from parents today. I mean, I see it even with our kids in school. Like, they ask, like, parents are much more sort of present, I suppose. Like, I don't remember my parents like ever being backstage, right? They didn't, even like one of our girls did swim team for a summer, and it's like the parents have to volunteer, they have to show up. Like, I really had no perspective on how, like, the commitment from the parent. And I don't
Yeah.
think that was as true back then. Like, I don't know how things ran, but maybe there were two parents backstage with a couple, 100 kids or however many kids it was. But now there's like, it's not a one-to-one match. But when I'm backstage on these like, there's a lot of parents doing a
Wow.
lot of heavy lifting to make this stuff work today. So it is a sort of different model. And it takes a lot, it definitely takes a lot of commitment from the parents and caregivers and the whole team to make these activities happen. It's it's a lot of work.
As someone with no kids, like that's one of those, like this whole idea of like their
Yeah.
activities. Like, I'm sure having a kid is really hard. I get it. But like on top of this, like the stuff that they do, like
Totally.
you don't want the kids,
I don't think it
and
was
that's
like that when we were growing up. Like, they dropped us off, they picked us up.
right. Yeah.
Like, they weren't it wasn't like there were volunteer schedules. I mean, there were always a few moms that were like helped with costumes or were, maybe,
Yeah.
Involved, but everything was just, I think it was just a smaller scale back then.
Probably. Yeah. And you mentioned growing up in Charlotte and then deciding to say one day as a preteen, I'm going to be a ballerina in New York City. Now it sounded like your parents were pretty supportive. What about that decision of being like, okay, you know what? As much as I love Charlotte, we got my friends here. To be a ballerina, I got to go to the Big Apple.
Yeah.
So how did that conversation go, and what kind of struggle was that like for you?
The model for becoming a professional dancer is that they're the big companies, national or international. I ended up dancing with New York City Ballet. So that's one of the biggest, most famous, and most prestigious ballet companies in the world, right? I would say probably top 3 in the world. Definitely, top in the US. And those companies have schools underneath them. and the schools are essentially feeders, right? So they bring in the most talented dancers around the country or maybe around the globe, train them, and then the sort of the best of the best from that group of dancers at the school goes into the company. And then the ones that aren't selected sort of fan out and go into other great companies around the country, or maybe they go overseas, or maybe they go to college. You know, and it was just something that they did very seriously, right, in high school. So the way that these schools work, just to give you sort of like the big picture, is they run during the school year, but they also, most of them have a summer course program. And the summer course is a way to bring in more people from around the country. So if you want to go to the School of American Ballet, which is the official school of New York City Ballet, so that's definitely number one ballet school in the country, and again, one of the best ballet schools in the world, the sort of entry point would be you can either go and try to audition for the year in New York, but you'll have to be, you know, ready to figure out how to live there and move there. But if you're coming from outside of Manhattan, what a lot of people do is go for the summer course. So it's a 5-week program, and they actually tour around the country. And all of the big schools do this. So they'll do I think they call it an audition tour, right? So we would drive, you know, a bunch of girls from the studio, somebody's mom would drive us to Winston-Salem for the day, because that's where North Carolina School of the Arts is. And the woman that was running their program used to dance with New York City Ballet. So they had a very good, North Carolina School of the Arts had a very good dance program. And all the big schools would audition there, by and large. So you drive up there and you can audition for the summer program. So the first time I did this, I think I was 12 and I was not accepted. But I actually got like a pretty nice rejection letter that I remember I kept on a bulletin board in my room for many years, because it was like, you know, it wasn't just you're rejected. It was like, we see a lot of potential in you. And, you know, we would encourage you to come back another year. So when I was 14, I went back to audition. And again, I'm sort of just doing it in part. Yes, I wanted to go, but there's, you know, older girls at the studio who are a little closer to potentially pursuing a professional path, who were looking at this probably more seriously than I was as just a 14-year-old kid growing, you know, in Charlotte. And so they probably organized a trip. We're going up to NCSA, you know, to audition. We probably auditioned for more than one school. I can't really remember the details of it, but I imagine that we would have gone up more than, you know, for more than one school. But SAB was the one that I had my eye on. That was the one I really wanted to go into. It would be like if the Yankees had like, you know, a training school, right? For like 12 to 18. Like, if you want to play with the Yankees, you're going to do what you can to get into that school. And so, you know, you go up in the summertime, and that's the way it works. So I was accepted the year I was 14, and my parents said, like, well, you're way too young. Absolutely not. Like, I obviously hadn't really talked it through that much with them, and they were like, no. So they turned it down, and I ended up going to a different school that one of my teachers in Charlotte was had a good connection with and worked at sometimes, up in Chautauqua, New York, part of the Chautauqua Institute. So that's like way upstate New York. It's, you know, Chautauqua is like this like small sort of artsy enclave, and they have a big summer, like people come in. I think they have the opera, they have the ballet in the summer. So they actually bring in dancers from like all over the world, and then they run a little school. So it's a very nice, you know, there's like a lot of wealthy people that live there. I guess people probably come in and stay in, you know, Airbnbs, but it was a much smaller sort of scale, you know, it's a gated community. My parents, you know, my teacher vouched for it. So they felt comfortable sending me there. So that's what I did that summer. The following year, I went back when I was 15 to audition, and they pulled me out of the dressing room and said, the woman that was running the audition was this older Russian woman named Olga Kostrytsky, who later became one of my teachers. When I went there, and she said, why didn't you come last year? I see you were accepted. and but you didn't attend. What happened? And I said, my parents said I was too young. And she said, tell your parents you won't get a third chance, meaning like you come this year or this is it. Like if you
Wow.
turn us down, you're not getting invited back. That was the message. And so I delivered the message. And when I was, when I got the acceptance letter, which is sort of like, these acceptance letters, like the thing I could liken it to the most is like, you're getting into like your college acceptance. Like, it's like, is it a skinny envelope or is it a little bit thick? And it's got like registration forms and like information. And so, every day you're getting off the bus, running to the mailbox to see like, are the letters here? Did I get the letter yet? So when we got that letter that I was accepted, there really was no debate and off I went. So that was sort of, I think my parents realized that that I had this great gift and they really did their best to be supportive of it and to honor it, even though, I'm sure they still thought I was frankly a little bit young to be, living by myself in Manhattan for 5 weeks in the summer at age 15.
So tell me that setup though, because it sounds like your parents were slightly protective. So you're 700 miles away from home in New York City as a 15-year-old. Tell me the parameters that they set up for you for your safety, obviously, because they want their baby girl to come home.
Totally. They have a very good setup now, which I think that it was built, I went up there in the mid 90s. So this is probably like, definitely part of your era of New York.
Oh yeah.
Life, right? Like these were some good years. We had some of the golden years in New York, in my opinion.
This is like the Disneyfication of New York, the 90s. Mr. Giuliani had come in, cleaned it up.
Everything was getting cleaned up, spiffed up. Exactly. Like, so the School of American Ballet, New York City Ballet performs in Lincoln Center. If you're facing the plaza, you're facing the fountain, the Metropolitan Opera House is behind, the Philharmonic is to your right, and New York City Ballet, which it used to be called New York State Theater, now it's called the Koch Theater, is to your left, right? So that's where we performed. In the back of the plaza, there's a little theater. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but they do Broadway back there. There's a really cool library, like a performing arts library, and then sort of up a set of stairs and over are the studios for the School of American Ballet. And that is also, there's a cafeteria and that's where the dormitories are. So they had built a dorm for the dancers and you're in the same building as kids from Juilliard who are obviously a lot older, right? Like Juilliard is a college. So, but they're on totally different floors, completely separated from you. You see them in the elevators, you see them in the cafeteria, but I didn't really have a lot of interaction, frankly, with the Juilliard kids.
So you're a 15-year-old kid, literally living in Lincoln Center. Like it's not like you're living in like down the block, Upper West Side. You were literally in Lincoln Center. So I'm sure your parents were like, okay, this is fun.
You're in a dorm, so you have to show ID to enter, to exit. They have a security guard. You have to sign in and out of the dorm. They have to give you permission. Like if you wanted to go to the movies, if you wanted to go out to lunch, or like we used to go to FAO Schwartz, they had and they would send like, here's all the activities you could do. Like we did every single one. If it was like go to Ellis Island, I did it. If it would, I saw so many Broadway shows that summer because they would take groups of us. So like we saw Guys and Dolls, we saw Cats, like I saw Phantom, we saw if they were playing it and they took a group from SAB, like my parents were, they gave me the full experience. It was amazing. Wow. And in that first week they drove me up, I think on a Sunday to my memory, in the summer, beginning of June, dropped me at the dorms, here's your bedding, here's your suitcase, here's your dance bag, we'll see you in 5 weeks. And basically came back to get me at the end.
I'm trying to imagine myself as a 15-year-old, my parents dropped me off because I never did summer camps as a kid.
Yeah.
If I was a 15, and I should mention, I was a scared little shit, but if I was dropped off in New York City when I was 15 years old, I probably would have had like some sort of conniption. I would have probably like just melted. What was your reaction as you see them waving from the car?
Yeah, I was excited. I was nervous, of course. it was a pretty good system because basically, like, the dorms are in a separate elevator bank than the school, but you didn't have to, in reality, you didn't even have to leave the building if you didn't want to. It wasn't like, and Lincoln, that part of New York is really nice, as you know, those
Yeah.
blocks right there. So it was scary. I was more scared, frankly, about like, you know, the class and sort of like what to expect, I think, than
That's
actually
funny.
like being in New York. I don't even remember. Like, I'm
It's
sure,
so funny.
I
Like,
had a
you must
roommate.
have been Mary Helen, you must have been so advanced because and for you to be like, "I don't even remember being scared," because to me, like, me just imagining it, I'm scared. So that's just it just goes to show you your kinda mindset as a teenager and how focused you were. And so in Charlotte, to use this parlance, you're sort of like the big fish in a little pond.
A little
Now
bit, yeah.
yeah, you go to New York City, you said the Mecca, it's the best dancers on the planet are there. The best kids have brought have been sort of like driven all the way across the country to New York City. Um, what were those early days like? Because people don't like to use the word anymore, but like, was there an imposter syndrome where you're like, oh shit, am I not good enough to be here? Maybe I'm really good for Charlotte, but not really good for New
Yeah.
York?
I mean,
Well,
it was
why?
really like, show us what you've got. Like nobody's there, nobody's pumping you up, nobody's pushing you ahead. And the way that it worked is you have in that first week, they basically had slotted you into a class based off of your audition. And I think, they put me in a class and then they bumped me up a level. I think they realized I was maybe behind my level. So they're trying to get you in the right level of class. But they're also, that first week, the entire staff is like observing classes. So you're in the class, you're working really hard, you're doing your best to, prove yourself, to learn, to get better. The doors, are mostly open. There might be other kids in the hall, but there's also a lot of staff that's coming through that's watching. They have the clipboard, they're literally like writing things down. And I didn't even know enough to know that this is how it went because I'd never really been to one of these big schools before. But at the end of that first week, they ask maybe 20, 25 people to come back and return for the year. So that's
Within that first week?
yes.
Whoa.
Yeah. They can see it pretty quickly. It's last year. I don't know because, nobody ever sat me down and explained it to me, but I think they're looking more at your talent and your potential than like necessarily the level that you're at. What is your work ethic? Are you serious? They really want to see appetite, I think, is one of the things they're looking at the most seriously is your hair, so things that look bad, like if your hair is messy, right? Like is your hair neat? Like, do you have your uniform on? Are you on time? And then from there, like, that's the expectation, by the way. Like
Yeah.
anything else, by the time you get to this level, like you better know how to do a proper bun and be on time, or you probably wouldn't have even gotten in.
Wow.
So like, the baseline is already very high. And then, then you just have to show up and do the work, basically. So that's really how it went. And then from there, you're in class, you're taking a couple of dance classes a day. You have technique in the morning. These are like hour-and-a-half classes. You're doing point work. You're doing variations. I think I did a little bit of partnering that year for the first time, which is fun, where you're, starting to dance with the guys. And for a lot of them, it was probably their first time too. So everyone's sort of learning. And when you're finished, you're kind of hanging out in the dorms, and we're going out on these field trips and, doing activities. I mean, I remember almost getting hit by a taxi, like being just like not understanding how to cross the street, which you can imagine. You're just like a dumb kid who doesn't know that, like, yes, the taxi will run you over. Like you have to cross with the lights and all those sort of things.
That's so funny. And so when you're in your early weeks, you mentioned the fact that the bar's already set high. Everyone's very professional at this point. Did you think you're like, oh man, there are other people just as good as me or better than me? Because you had come from a place where you were probably like the star student, the star ballerina. Was it intimidating to be surrounded by so many talented people, or was it something that even drove you to become better?
Yeah, I think for me it was very encouraging because, you're like, I didn't feel intimidated and I didn't feel insecure. I felt, probably more motivated to work harder. Like, you're like, this is the level that I'm really supposed to be at. So everything just kind of was like this really, really easy fit. The thing that was tricky for us with getting invited back for the year was we had to solve a couple of problems. Like, you're going to live in the dorm, but the biggest one you could probably guess is like, what about high school? You're 15 years old. Like, we're not going to drop out of high school. So the options then were basically, you can homeschool yourself from the dorms. Clearly not a winner. Okay.
No.
And they're like, look, here's Janine. There was this one student who was a little bit older than me, who was very successful. She already graduated. Like, she like raced through it. Like, she was just a very, I presume, type A person, but they always held out like Janine is like the success story of homeschooling herself. My parents were like, that's a joke. That will never happen. Like, obviously. So the other option was to go to the Professional Children's School, which is a private school. If you're ever up in Lincoln Center, you should walk down West 60th Street. It's on 60th Street. It's right across the street from Fordham Law School. And like, when I was there, like, Macaulay Culkin was there.
Wow.
There were a lot of kids on soap operas and really talented musicians, like, prodigy musicians that were attending Juilliard as children. There were, like, kids on Broadway went there. There were kids from School of American Ballet, because you're so serious about dance that you can't be in a regular school. And so that school was a wonderful resource and a great support, because it allowed us to go to ballet. I think we went and did a class or two in the morning, and then we would go back to the dorms, change, run down to ballet class, change, grab lunch in the cafeteria to go, run back to school, do another 2 or 3 classes, back to the dorms, change really fast, go into your afternoon dance classes. Sometimes you had rehearsals and things like that after. So that was sort of the program. And it wouldn't have been doable without a school like PCS. So it was really helpful, especially when, I was 16 when they asked me to join the company as an apprentice. And I got my contract shortly thereafter. So from that point on, that was basically the start of my junior year in high school. I basically didn't really go back to school. I mean, I would go in because, like, suddenly you go from just being in this very competitive ballet school to being in an actual, like, the best ballet company in the world, right?
Wow.
No preparation, don't have a mentor. Like, you just got there by basically sheer force of will and talent. And it's like, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's a little bit like the knives are out. It's not a nice place. It's not an easy environment. It's not like the older girls are like, hey, great, there's this really nice 16-year-old. Isn't she nice? Let's help her out. No, it's not like that at all. I got there, I didn't even know how to do stage makeup because I'd never done a performance at the school because I was there for such a short time and I wasn't in the professional class my first year.
Wow.
So I got there for my first Nutcracker, and I was like, a friend had like taken me shopping who had done the workshop performance. She was a little older than me in an older class, a more advanced class. And she was like, well, this is what you're going to buy. And I was like, okay, well, somebody will show me how to do it. And they were like, you'll figure it out. That's the environment that it was. So that was a big shock, as you can imagine. And they're just like, yeah, hope you fail. That's kind of the attitude of the other dancers. I mean, sounds terrible to say, but it's true. And I imagine it's probably not that hard for you to understand.
You're painting a bleak picture of, because I didn't want to bring this up, but since you said it, like, I mean, of Black Swan, because I think for most lay people who have limited knowledge of ballet, they think of Black Swan. And in that, obviously, there's like this whole older ballerina battle against the younger ballerina. You're saying that's pretty legitimate. That's as much as they like
worked on Black Swan, right? Like, I was Natalie's trainer. So I'm very familiar with it. I love the movie. Yeah, I think it's totally true to life. If anything, like, there was one scene in that film where, like, Natalie's character falls on stage, and when she goes in the wings, she's like rushed by all these dancers. Like, are you okay? Are you okay? I mean, when you watch it again, you're going to see this scene. You'll remember this conversation. And I was like, on set, I'm like, Natalie, like this would never happen. And she was like, you should tell Darren. I'm like, there.
The director.
On stage, maybe your best friend, you have one best friend who'd be willing to speak to you and ask if you're okay, and everyone else would treat you like a leper because it's like contagion. They don't want anything to do with it. You know, and so like, you know, I told Darren, I was like, this is not realistic. You would need, I would recommend you change this. So he pulled, you know, maybe there's 3 or 4 girls instead of 8, like the first time they shot it. But I was just like, that's just not how it goes. It's not like they're out there like, you got this, you know, which is how I hear the girls at our daughter's studio acting now, which is a nice thing. You know, how much it's changed today, I'm not sure.
Wow.
I can't say, but certainly, yes, that was my experience.
Wow. Well, fast forwarding, you obviously become a professional. You have this amazing career. You talked about the fact that you actually helped Natalie Portman prepare for Black Swan. Tell me about the life of a professional ballerina. Was it what you had hoped it was going to be? I mean, we mentioned some of the dark side about it, but like, was it as fulfilling? Was it what you wanted as that little, 15-year-old kid when you first came into New York City?
Totally. It's a good question. Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is an incredible art, and you're performing it at like this outrageously high level, right? So, in retrospect, I wish that I had had more support and more preparation, because, I had a great career. Could I have had more longevity? Just like I didn't leave for really physical reasons. It was more like I was just so burned out because it's really tough. It's really, really tough. And I found that at a certain point, you put so much, like a dancer's life is basically marked by sacrifice. And one of the reasons why Natalie was so good in Black Swan is because she worked so hard to prepare. Like we did 5 or 6 hours a day of training, 6 days a week for, 6 months to 12 months leading into that film. And that was important because it helped, if you're training, like she was working for a lot of that time on other movies, on other sets. We were getting up the crack of dawn, going to it when she wrapped her day on set. And you have to really know and understand that like, this is all you do. You're not partying. You're not drinking, beer or wine with your friends. Like you have room for nothing else. You have no life whatsoever. Your entire life is your art. And so when that art fulfills you like nothing else, it's 100% worth it. But for me, I found, when I got a little bit older and the scale started to shift and I felt like I was putting in a lot more than I was getting out, that's when I was like, oh, it's time for me to make a change. That was my experience with it.
Wow.
Because it's constant sacrifice, but it shouldn't, it shouldn't feel like sacrifice. I wasn't doing it because my parents wanted me to do it or because I was being pressured into it. I did it because it was the thing I wanted to do more than anything else. And I think that probably for most people performing at a really high level in athletics or, dance or those types of things, that has to be true. It absolutely has to come from you.
Wow. That is so, you mentioned the word burnout, and the mental health aspects of our society have improved. Like when I was younger, maybe I'm a little older than you, but when you were younger too, you're probably like, oh, what, put a smile on your face. What do you get? So like, I think we're a little more self-aware about mental health. What's it like in your industry? Has it changed, or are you aware of it changing where maybe ballerinas are not burning out or just are having these?
So, I'm not dancing professionally right now, so I don't know what the like on the inside, like, does it look like it's changing on the outside? I think so. I hope that it is. I can say that like, the school that our kids attend, I think that they really care. Like it's a really excellent school that's actually run by one of my friends that I used to dance with in New York. And I think they really care about sort of like the dancer's whole health. And your mental health is a huge part of that. And as you probably know, I imagine you've interviewed a lot of athletes too. Like mental health is a big part of, it takes a lot of strength, like mental strength, tenacity, to be able to perform at a high level in front of thousands of people every single night. And, dancers are doing it, but, the difference between dance and sports is that, like, professionally, you're not really getting paid. I mean, New York City Ballet takes care of their dancers probably better than any other ballet company. And I just mean, like, financially, it wasn't like we were starving, but and a lot of dancers.
Well, you couldn't eat anyway, Mary Helen. So it's not like.
Well, sadly, but you're also, you're not getting rich. It's like you're doing it because you love to. So is it better? Is it an easier, more open environment? I hope so, because it is very hard. And that's just that's a part of it. So, for me, what I'm doing now with Ballet Beautiful, which is my fitness and lifestyle, a lot of that initially is frankly just like a whole lot of healing that I needed to do with creating, a program that's about being healthy and strong and happy, and using, sort of taking, like, I looked at the dance world and I was like, this is really messed up. I'm not going to try to change it. Like, I'm one person. It's not like I'm here to, like, I'm not like a ballet activist, like, let's revolutionize the dance world. Though now that I have kids that want to do it, maybe that's who I will become.
Right.
It's personal in a different way for me now, I will say. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to build this entirely separate world I'm going to take all the things I love about dance, the glamour, the artistry, the athleticism of it. And I'm going to, build this, like, very healthy and wholesome kind of place that's about building strength and fitness and good health and longevity. Because I do think that that's something that, is really missing from dance careers, is that concept of longevity. And, that we're taking care of our bodies. Like, your body feels very disposable as a dancer, and you just, like, beat the hell out of it until it doesn't work anymore, is kind of, the way it goes. And that's not a way to have a, longevity in your career. And, I want people to be doing my workouts when they're, 80, 85 years old. Like, this is it for life. This is how you train your body. This is how you move your body. It's a much more sort of gentle approach, like challenging, but like looking at it like through a very long-term lens. And dance is not like that at all. Dance is very like, you're on stage tonight, and how do you make that, how do you make that like your best performance? So that's something that I think about a lot and work on very hard in my own business every single day, because I think it is so important.
I want to pull a thread on that about transition, because you also talked about athletes there. And whenever you talk to an athlete or see an interview, they'll say they don't miss the training, they don't miss the games, they don't miss the money, they miss the camaraderie. And that's why a lot of players feel they hang around, because they're like, I don't know what to do in my life if I'm not around with sweaty guys 6 days a week. So what was it that you missed when you transitioned from full-time ballerina to entrepreneur running this business?
Right.
There's something that jumped out, although the camaraderie piece may be a little more complex, because you mentioned
unfortunately, I hope that, I mean, certainly you had good friends, right? And you had, and like, I was in New York last fall for New York City Ballet's 75th, and they did a really nice job with it and bringing in so many of the dancers. And by the way, it's a small group. It's only like 700 people or something that ever danced there. Like, it's a pretty small group of people. So there is a camaraderie that I think, you've been, even if you didn't feel it then, I do see it now. And I think it's wonderful. And that, I see a lot of dancers trying to, like, respect and help some of their former colleagues, with various things. But transitioning is hard. So I'd say for me, the thing that I missed is probably really the act of performing and being on stage and, sharing your art at that level. But, would I do it today if I could? Like, I don't have 12 hours a day, to spend on my body, because that's what it really is. Like, your body is your instrument. And so you have to spend so much time. So, it's a very, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's just sort of the facts. It means that your life, it like is a little bit of a selfish life, because everything has to be about, like, how do you feel? How is your body going to function? How is your body going to perform? Not like, can you show up for your partner or, your parents or your kids, everything is about, like, it has to be, because it's so consuming. So it's a very consuming life that I think that makes it harder for you to have, maybe as full or rich of a life sort of outside of the stage. And I'm not saying that people haven't done it, and certainly some of them have and do it very successfully, but it's definitely, there's a conflict with that. And maybe with all art, there's
Yeah.
an element of like, but I also see it as like a God-given gift. I think that, we're given gifts. You were given an amazing gift, right? For connecting with people, for talking with people, for inspiring other people through that. And, this is a gift that I had, and pretty much anyone that's on that stage or on any of these big professional stages shares that gift. And it is a wonderful thing. So, I also look at it as like, we have a responsibility, I think, as humans, to like honor the gifts that we were given, to honor our bodies and our lives, and hopefully each other too.
I love
So
that. And talk to me about now what being an entrepreneur and running Ballet Beautiful does. What does that give you that
right.
ballet never could do? I mean, because it sounds like, it's, if anyone follows you on social media, you're having a blast doing what you're doing now. So
Yeah.
obviously there's joy to it, but outside of the actual joy of like having your business and helping people, find, a healthier way to live through ballet. What is it giving you now?
That's a really good question. And it is interesting, like that. I think the transition from being a professional dancer or professional athlete to becoming an entrepreneur, for me, that gave me so much freedom, because as a dancer, it's like being, a Broadway performer, right? Where you don't have that, you have control over your career, but at the end of the day, I couldn't be like, hey, I'm going to cast myself, like tonight I want to dance the Sugar Plum Fairy. It's like, it doesn't work like that. But when I started my business and I started setting goals and I started reaching those goals, I was like, well, this is awesome, because I really am in charge and I have so much more power over what I can do, where I can go. And, essentially like that, I think that's the wonderful thing about being an entrepreneur, is that you really call the shots. So, like there's really no goal, especially here, we're very blessed to live in the US, where like this country supports entrepreneurs, and that, I think entrepreneurship is a big part of kind of the American dream. And, so I've been able to build a company and hit a lot of those goals, and share this workout and share this lifestyle with so many people. And also in a way that, like, I had 4 kids, in the last 10 years. Like, so that's the kind of thing that would probably take you out of a professional workforce. Doing anything else, certainly I wouldn't be able to be on stage every night,
Right.
and, raise and manage and run a family the way that I do. So it's for me, that I love that aspect of it. It's freedom. It's the ability to like, the sky is the limit, is how I see it. And I just love that aspect.
That's so cool. So if the algorithm pulls this up, someone who's like researching ballet, whether they want to go into ballet or the children who want to go into ballet, what's a message for folks who want to make ballet their life's work? Like, if someone is just like Googling, like, how do I become a ballet dancer,
Right.
without walking us through the, go to your local studio and all that jazz. Like, what does it take to be
Yeah.
a
It's not
professional ballerina?
easy. Like, to do anything well is going to take a huge commitment of your time, right? Whether it's your studies, whether it's your sport, or, ballet as a hobby, or if you want to do it professionally. Like, you have to be prepared to commit a lot of your time, because you have to, it's that, and dance in particular is the repetition, the practice. I imagine it's similar to like doing drills in sports, but it's not just, the time you spend in the studio. What are you doing, outside of the studio? Are you doing your exercises to strengthen your core? This is a lot of what I do now, is understand, I obviously I have a lot of different perspective on things now that I'm in my 40s than I would have had, as you can imagine, when I was 16 years old.
Right.
We learn and we grow. So I think that if you want to do it, you find a good studio, there really are no barriers. When it's something that you really, really want to do, you will find a way to get around it. It is expensive, but a lot of, ballet schools have scholarships. So I think you have to, talk to them about that. Like there's people that are willing to sometimes, help out with that. I mean, I had to have scholarships. Once I went up to New York, it cost a fortune, I think my parents were doing okay when I was doing it locally, but basically all the money that they had set aside for my college went to my high school tuition, essentially.
Wow.
Like to pay the dormitory, even with scholarships, like it still is not an expensive process. So, yes, there are all of those barriers, but I think that you just have to like punch through if it's something that you're really interested in doing. And I would say stick at it. Like I can remember having a teacher I didn't like, or, thinking, oh, I'm bored, I want to quit, because I was maybe in a class that was too easy for me. But, I toughed it out. I stuck with it. And I'm very happy. I'm very happy that I did. And I think that was the path that I was meant to be on. So trying to tune into that, like, is this where I'm really supposed to be in life? I always think that that's a good thing to be.
Great. I hate to ask women mother questions, but I feel like you've opened yourself up to it. And the idea that you went through this ballet life and now you have these 4 kids who may want to pursue being, and you saw, almost like the way you described it, like you went to war, but like you saw the kid when it came to ballet.
Yes.
Does it worry you that your kids may want to follow your footsteps all the way through, not just now in their childhood, but as they grow older?
Right. So, our oldest is 10 now, and our three daughters are very talented. Baby brother, the guy's not even 3 years old yet. So
Okay.
who knows?
Let's not talk about him. Let's talk
He'll
about
want to play lacrosse. Maybe he'll be an Olympic swimmer. I have no idea. Maybe he'll be a radio star. I always laugh. I think he's very musical. I'm like, he's like baby John Denver. Like,
there you go.
Who knows what he wants to do? And I don't know what the girls will ultimately want to do either. But I will say that they're very talented. And my feeling about it is, if they want to do it, I'm going to help them. I know that one thing that was so interesting to me at the reunion that I went to for New York City Ballet is like the people I used to dance with are now running these companies. Like all of a sudden I'm like, this is so strange. Like, because, you just remember being like kids backstage joking around, like just being dorks. And you're like, they're running like the greatest ballet companies in the world, or running the best schools. So it's like, we do have, would I call on my network to make sure that not that my child gets a spot, but like if they do, that somebody is looking out for them. I think you do. I feel a little bit better, frankly, knowing like, one, I've learned a lot and I could give them support that I just never had. And, I'm not criticizing my parents. It's just, it's not what they did. How could they have really helped me? So there's that aspect of it. And then there's the people that we know that, you would want to have. I personally feel much better knowing that I know the world, not that the world is dark, but that every profession is probably, has darkness. I mean, I have friends that work in fashion. It's a pretty bad industry, right? But like, if that's your passion, I would want to help them make it as safe and happy and successful, quite frankly, as I possibly could.
Sweet. Her name is Mary Helen Bowers. Mary Helen, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. This was a pleasure.
And that's a wrap for season 1 of Good Listen. I am Joe Pardavila. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email at joepardavila@protonmail.com. You can always connect with me on X, LinkedIn, or Instagram at Joe Pardavila, or TikTok at jpardavila. If you are consuming this on Apple or Spotify, it'd be great if you left a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you could give us a big old thumbs up. I'll see you next time on Good Listen in the fall. Until next time, make sure you keep track of everything that's going on my social media accounts. Plenty more content on the way. But until next time, adios.